Overdrive. Accelerate. Hello guys. I'm here to give you my review of Power Rangers Operation Overdrive. The worst Power Rangers season I've seen so far. Yeah, there isn't a lot to good about this season. And while I normally do not discuss the theme songs for these Power Rangers seasons, I want to at least talk about the theme song for Operation Overdrive. And really, to talk about the theme song for Operation Overdrive, I really wish I had the West Texas Rednecks with me. Because the theme song for Operation Overdrive sucks. Okay? It's a rap song, and when I think Power Rangers, I don't think rap songs. It's not even a good rap song either. It's, ugh. So that out of the way, the season kicks off with Kick into Overdrive, a two-part episode that opens with the future Red Ranger for the team, or just some guy named Mackenzie Hartford, otherwise known as Mac. He's having a daydream about being in an adventure novel. And he falls out of his hammock. As for his dad, Andrew Hartford, well, his dad is an adventurer. And his dad comes across the Corona Aurora, a very legendary crown, said to have a lot of mystical powers. But upon finding Corona Aurora and taking it, Hartford releases the Sentinel Knight as well as Flurious and Moltor, two brothers who control fire and ice. So they are essentially Snow Miser and Heat Miser, in a way. And they act just like Snow Miser and Heat Miser to eat, actually, too. So the Sentinel Knight explains the situation to Hartford, who then decides to build his own Power Ranger team. And he starts recruiting people. From Hollywood, California, he recruits Dax Lowe, who is a stuntman in movies. In Monaco, at the Italian Grand Prix, he recruits Veronica Robinson, or Ronnie as she's known in this game, or in this series. In Brazil, he leaves a invitation to Will Atten, a safecracker. And over in London, he gives one to Rose Ortiz, who's some English professor or some professor somewhere or something like that. So he brings them all to his mansion as Moltor and Flurious take over their respective bases. Flurious gets something, I guess, in the North Pole with a Yeti named Nord, and Moltor takes over a volcano. So Dax, Ronnie, Rose, and Will come to Hartford's mansion, and he fills them in on the situation about Flurious, Moltor, and the Corona Aurora. They originally don't believe him, and Rose actually says if he's so rich, why doesn't he just buy an army? And then the Sentinel Knight appears to him, and they decide to accept Hartford's offer and become Power Rangers. And he gives them their morphers, the Overdrive trackers, and he also decides to GNA splice, which is the source of the civilian powers this season. Dax, he becomes the Blue Ranger, Ronnie becomes yellow, Will becomes black, and Rose becomes pink. So yes, we have another season where the African American is the Black Ranger in another season. Hartford's originally going to be the Red Ranger, but before he can get his genes spliced or whatever he's doing, Mac comes in. So they all set off to face Flotor and Morius and their respective foot soldiers, the Chillers and the Lava Lizards, and they all morph except for Hartford, who ends up not being able to morph. and Mac ends up grabbing the Red Overdrive tracker and morphing and becoming the Red Ranger. After they defeat Motar and Florius's forces, Hartford takes Mac's morpher away, and see, Motor had also cut this thing in the volcano where he stole the Corona Aurora and it made all the lava come down. Now, the Rangers want to go after the Corona Aurora, but Hartford tells them that there are lives in the city that need saving. Yes. And the fact that someone had to tell them that... Motor eventually captures Hartford because he found out that Hartford tricked him with a fake Corona Aurora, and he ends up with the real Corona Aurora, and the Rangers save Hartford. For this, Mac is rewarded as a permanent Red Ranger, and he gets his genes spliced and his DNA, whatever. Anyway, here's his civilian powers. Mac, he gets the power of super strength. He gets the power of super strength. Rose, she gets invisibility. Dash gets super agility. Will gets super hearing and enhanced vision. And Ronnie gets super speed. Might I also add that I don't even know why Hartford got most of these people. Because to be fair, none of them have any real skills that can help them along in this thing here. Excuse me. Kick into Overdrive does remind me of Lightspeed Rescue's premiere, but done a lot less better. And to be perfectly honest, while there is a serial nature of this show, which I do like, you know, it just isn't executed properly, but I'll get to that later. So in the 4th episode, Heart of Blue, Dax meets this girl called Mira, who he falls for. Mira turns out to be a villain called Miratrix, who's trying to release a villain called Candor from a jewel that she wears around her neck. And she gets a scroll that the Ranger had gotten in the 3rd episode, but it's a fake scroll, but it's a scroll nonetheless. So, you know, in other fillers, Rangers end up getting the 1st and 2nd jewels, the 1st jewel of the Corona, and the story continues with Man face-to-face, in which Motor recruits a new ally, a being known as Tyzon, who's an alien from the planet Mercutia or wherever. And Tyzon can make his entire body Mercury or go into a complete reptilian. He's working with Motor because Motor cursed him to his reptile form and promised to restore him if he found this scroll or parchment that the Rangers have. But he's not entirely evil. In fact, Mac manages to convince Tyzon when he finds out that the jewel that Motor is after is the Corona Aurora. Mac convinces Tyzon to actually turn against Motor. And Tyzon actually gets them the 2nd jewel of the Corona Aurora. And with those 2 jewels in possession over this two-part episode, the 2 jewels restore Tyzon to his human form. So then that leads to the 2-part episode Man on Mercury, where basically the first part of it deals with our fourth villains faction of the season, the Fear Cats, named Mig and Benego. Mig and Bingalo, or whatever their names are. So Tyzon knows the Fear Cats, and they actually defeat the Power Rangers at first, and then Tyzon helps them. But in doing so, he's he's trapped in his Mercury form, and that ends part 1. So yeah. In part 2, the Rangers restore Tyzon to his human form, and Hartford offers him a morpher to join the team, but he refuses. We find out that it's due to Tyzon's backstory that while he was on Mercutia, he was a leader of a search and rescue team, and he failed his team and apparently lost his fiancée Vela. But Tython does eventually join the team as the Mercury Ranger, and they defeat the Fear Cats. And then most of the other episodes following Man of Mystery, Man of Mercury, are filler episodes, to be honest. There is the 15th anniversary team up, which is Once a Ranger, but I already did a review on that. I don't like that episode much because it undermines the Overdrive Rangers, and two, that brings into why I don't like them, this entire team, but I'll get into that also later. So really, the last real story development comes in Things Not Said, where you actually learn that Mac is an android, and they have foreshadowed this a lot in the season. So you find out that Mac's an android created by Hartford. I don't mind necessarily the twist of Mac being an android, but it does open up a plot hole. It opens up a plot hole of technically then he wouldn't need to have his DNA spliced anyway because he doesn't have any DNA. Because an android would not have DNA. So, yeah. And that just goes into a change in Mac's character. Because he starts calling Hartford Mr. Hartford instead of Dad and all this other stuff. So the final two episodes here are Nothing to Lose and Crown and Punishment, both of which are very good. But in the final story arc, we lose all of the villains, with the exception of Moltor and Florius. It starts when the Fear Cats are destroyed, then Camdor and Miratrix are gone, and then Florius destroys Moltar. And in the finale, the Rangers get the fourth jewel of the Corona Aurora, plus the Corona Aurora. Florius has one of the jewels because Norg found it in Camdor's lair and gave it to Florius. So Florius attacks the Hartford mansion, and all the Rangers morph and fight, but Florius grabs Mac and threatens to destroy him if the Rangers and Hartford don't hand over the Corona Aurora and the gems and the jewels, which they do, against Mac's better interest. So eventually, though, the Rangers go outside. They fight Florius, who's combined with the Corona Aurora. He says no human can stop him, so that makes Mac fight him in his battleized mode, which is basically the Sentinel Knight on him. But the rest of the Rangers defeat the Chillers. Mac defeats Florius and apparently dies in the process. And this is the only problem I really have with this ending of this episode, Crown and Punishment, in that the Aurora, the Sentinel Knight, puts a Corona Aurora on Mac's head and it restores his life, and it makes him a real boy. The real boy thing, that's too much Pinocchio for me, honestly. But you know, I guess you could say that Mac earned his humanity in a way, but he never, in my opinion, really did. I mean, sure, he sacrificed himself to defeat Moltor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you get humanity. He really didn't learn much about humanity well, he did, but after he became an android, he just was almost suicidal about wanting to be destroyed after he found out he was an android. So that's the plot synopsis. So as far as characters go, let's start with the Rangers. There's not going to be a lot on these Rangers because I really don't like any of these guys. Well, Mac was starting out as a somewhat okay Ranger, then he became the android. But the thing that really gets me about all these Rangers is what happens during Once a Ranger. These Rangers do not deserve to be Rangers. They never deserved that title, because we've seen times where the Rangers lost their powers numerous times, like they do in Once a Ranger. But none of them ever gave up. None of them ever wanted to just quit being a Power Ranger. So guess what that is to me, and this is the same way for every single one of these people. They wanted the power, but not the responsibility. You know, there's a saying about with great power comes great responsibility. None of these guys should have ever had that power. In fact, if you wanted to do that, just turn the season over to Adam, Kira, Tori, Xander, and Bridge. And find a sixth one to bring back. Because at least they would have cared enough to fight about their powers if they ever lost them. So, yeah, I like the android twist that they did with Mac, but he had all the development, but it really came at the end of in the third act of the series. Dax was annoying and just no. Everything about Dax was annoying, and I couldn't like his character, and I still don't like his character. Will, being a thief, is one of the few people who actually brought something to this team that made sense. But there's his actor. Because, see, I know the story behind what his actor did, and it ticks me off. For those of you who don't, his actor Samuel Benta, at the first Power Morphicon in 2007, the entire cast of Operation Overdrive was at Power Morphicon. And there had been these 4 banners that were going to be signed and then auctioned off, and the proceeds would go to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Well, well, Samuel Benta took one of these pennants or something, and he went and got it signed and basically sold it and kept the money for himself or something like that. He did something with it, kept the money for himself, and he still got the thing, has never apparently returned it. So he essentially stole money from sick kids, which just irritates me. So essentially, this is life imitating art, in a way. And also, on top of Will as a character, while I think he was well acted, he's just a smug, arrogant, egotistical, one-man show a lot of times. Ronnie served no real purpose here. Yes, she could drive a fast car and apparently could pilot a shark, but that was never mentioned. Her only real skill that she was recruited for was she knew how to drive a fast car. And the one good episode she had was when she learned about the dangers of being overly competitive, since she was very overly competitive. But on top of that, she most of the time, a lot of times, ended up being a damsel in distress because the Fear Cats were obsessed with her draining her power or something. So really, no. Rose, while I think she is the favorite character of the Rangers I had, she wasn't even that good. I mean, she was well acted and all that. She was the smartest one of them, but it was really because, she even said that she learned from Hartford that being smart is something to be ashamed of, but she never acted like she was ashamed of it. So, Taizan is the disappointment of this series to me, because they had so much they could have done to develop Taizan's character, given his backstory and the angst surrounding it, but they really only did that in the Home and Away episode, where he got tricked into thinking he was back home with Vela when it was really one of the Fear Cats named Krazar. And that's really the only thing they did with Taizan with his angst. And so it's a disappointment that they didn't do what they could have done with him fully. That's the Rangers. Then there's Hartford himself. I get that Hartford is considered the mentor character of this series, but he's not, in my opinion. To me, he's more of the technical advisor. Because he's the one who's always making the new weapons and the new weapons, Zords and Morphers and things like this. And in that capacity, he fills it quite well. To me, the mentor role in this, the mentor figure in this series is Hartford's butler Spencer, who's also the most interesting character in this series. Not only is Spencer a master of disguising and change his voice when he needs to, he's the one who actually acts as a mentor to these Rangers, because he gives them all advice. At some point or another, he gives all of them advice on something. Maybe not Ranger advice, but about if they're down, he helps them out a lot of different things. So Spencer's more the mentor here. And it works in that role. So then we have the villains, who sadly are a hindrance to this season 2. The Fear Cats only wanted to destroy the Earth. They didn't even want to take it over. That's what they wanted the Corona Aurora for, was to take over the Earth. Which made the other villain factions mad, but ultimately they didn't accomplish anything. They never got a jewel of the Corona Aurora or the Corona Aurora itself or anything. And the one thing they did manage to get, all they used it for, was to bring back a gigantic undefeatable Zord-like thing called Agrios, which later got destroyed anyway, so they really didn't really serve a purpose. I will say that at least this show did establish that all these villains are decent hand-to-hand combatants and can fight hand-to-hand, so I'll give them that, but as far as what they actually did, most of them didn't do anything. Candor and Miratrix did manage to get one of the jewels of the Corona Aurora, but they ended up losing that to Norg, who was the comic relief villain. And they ended up not accomplishing too much either. Moltor, while he got the original crown of the Corona Aurora, ended up not accomplishing anything either in the long run. Even though he was the one, I will say he was the most active of the group, attacking the Rangers the most times. But again, it didn't lead to anything, and it didn't accomplish anything. He didn't be able to accomplish anything. Furious is the one who actually ended up accomplishing the most by doing the least. See, Furious, he basically sat around and let every other person, either the Rangers or one of the other villain factions, do all the work for him. Okay, Nor got the jewel he ended up with, and then after he destroyed Moltor, he basically got the Rangers to turn over both the Corona Aurora and the other 4 jewels that they had. So by him not being active or not doing as much as the other villains, he actually was the most successful. So that's really all I got to say about Operation Overdrive. I do hope that the next 2 I've seen, which are the next 2 that I'm going to be watching, which are Jungle Fury and RPM, I hope they end up being a little bit better than this one. Because while I could possibly go back and watch Mystic Force for fun, and definitely SPD and most of the other seasons in this retrospective I've done, I will not be touching Operation Overdrive again with a 10-foot pole. So, yeah. This will be in the Power Ranger Review Series playlist. Sadly, my Dino Charge reviews are on hiatus for 5 months because it had its mid-season finale last week. So, yeah. So, if you like this video, like button is down there, subscribe button is down there, and thank you for watching. Bye.